Well, first, when we talk about the fiscal rule, we are simply saying that you will have a budget of so much money. For instance, we now have a budget of 48 trillion shillings. Now, out of that budget, when we talk about a fiscal deficit, we are talking about the difference between the budget and what you are able to raise as revenue. So raising revenue is actually, those are our resources as government. Those are the resources we have as a government. Now, beyond that, beyond the revenue, if you have a budget of 48 and you are able to raise only 25 trillion shillings in terms of revenue, the import of that is that you have 13 trillion shillings that you might have to borrow. Make sure you implement your budget. Now, that 13 trillion shillings is expressed in terms of the GDP. And so you have the fiscal deficit. So in that booklet, you are saying you are not going to go beyond 3% of GDP. So you are going to live by that means. For example, now, if the 13 is going to give me 3%, therefore I should not go for 14 or 15. If I'm to do so, then I have to go to Parliament and seek their approval. And that's what we are doing. That's why you realize that our fiscal deficit is high. And we have committed that we are going to drive it back to 3%. When it comes to debt to GDP, we are saying it should not go beyond 50%. And we are saying that we shall make sure that by the end of this charter, that debt to GDP ratio is within the 50% sustainable level. Because beyond 50%, we are saying it's not sustainable borrowing. Sorry?
Why should someone think that something big happened?
Yeah, I think, put simply, to drive this thing out of the complicated English jargon, a charter is a kind of a commitment by the ruling government that we shall live within these means, that in terms of expenditure, we shall make sure that we are able to balance our revenues with the borrowing to this magnitude. So that's what the charter is doing, to make sure that we don't move out of those limits that can cause havoc to the economy. So that's what we are doing. It's actually about revenue expenditure management and ensuring that as we spend, we do not go beyond our means because we are answerable to the people. Now, if we overspend and overcommit them in terms of what they have to pay back in terms of those loans, we are actually making a grave mistake. And that's why the law requires us to take our proposals to Parliament. And Parliament, on behalf of the people of Uganda, approves those proposals. So that's what the charter is simply about. Do investments. For example, in terms of tax revenue, we have the domestic revenue mobilization strategy. That strategy stipulates a number of interventions to make sure that we generate more revenue. And alongside revenue generation, you have to make sure that the economy is growing. The economic base is strong because a strong economic base is what gives you more revenue. That's what gives you a bigger tax base. An economy where you get taxes from only 10% of the population is not what we desire. We want at least 50% of the population being able to pay taxes, both direct and indirect taxes. That's why you see interventions like the PDM aimed at making sure that nobody is left behind, to make everybody productive. And once people are productive, they are earning income. And it's from this gross national income that we are able to say that the country has attained middle income status or a higher level of development. Once you have attained that, it means your capacity to raise revenue is growing in tandem. And that's what we are talking about. So we must be able to raise the capacity of the population to support this service delivery in their own country. They don't have to depend heavily on borrowing. And this is the message. They have to be able to sustain their economies on their own by being able to pay the taxes.